Welcome to the Commentary Magazine Daily Podcast. Today is Thursday, July 31st, 2025. I'm John Podhoretz, the editor of Commentary Magazine. With me, as always, executive editor Abe Greenwald. Hi, Abe.
Hi, John.
Washington commentary columnist Matthew Comnetti. Hi, Matt.
Hi, John.
And social commentary columnist Christine Rosen. Hi, Christine.
Hi, John.
Christine's powers as our social commentary columnist will be brought into full bear when we turn to the story of Sydney Sweeney and American Eagle jeans. But I just want to read you, this just came over the wire. 43% of the American people favor a cutoff of U.S. military aid to Israel, and 60% believe the country has gone too far. Only 16% of those surveyed support Israel's actions, according to Newsweek, and an equal number think the administration should put diplomatic pressure on the Israelis. Oh, wait. This story is from August 9th, 1982. The magazine in question is Newsweek. The military operation that Americans supposedly opposed so vociferously was the invasion of Lebanon, which ended up with the Palestine Liberation Organization in control of southern Lebanon being expelled from Lebanon to Tunis. 752 adults surveyed in August of 1982. Americans in that time, according to this poll, are becoming increasingly aware of the Palestinian program, and 37% think an independent state should be created for them, but 45% oppose such a move. 32% said they are more sympathetic to the Israeli position than they were 1 year ago, while 41% said they were less sympathetic. Why am I bothering you with this? Because it shows you how evanescent the opinions of the American people can be in the midst of a conflict that is on their television screens or their social media screens or their TikTok screens or whatever, en medias res, in which one party, the Israelis, have a conventional military and are engaging in a conventional action, which was the case both in Lebanon in 1982 and is the case in Gaza in 2023, 2024, 2025. Attempts to pacify those who would attack cross-border using unconventional means, taking and holding territory to keep them from getting close to the border and crossing the border and attacking Israel and the like, and that relentlessly negative press coverage will have an effect even on an America, which I believe in 1982 wasn't quite as openly sympathetic to Israel as America had become in the days before October 7th, in part because, and this is an eerie parallel to today, elements of the right were still opposed to Israel. What we used to call the old right believed that, Israel was a socialist country we shouldn't bother with. Its historical tradition of sort of country club anti-Semitism, the sense that Israel was uppity and that the Arabs were our friends and selling us oil, and why were we bothering with this little place that was causing us so much trouble. So I bring this to say, maybe be of good cheer. Don't take everything too much to heart when it comes to some of this, because if this war can conclude on a positive note, and however we consider a positive note, I don't think that these opinions that we're now seeing, Gallup, same organization as in 1982, say the American people are expressing more negatively about Israel, are going to hold. That would be my presumption. Matt, where do you stand?
No, I think you're absolutely right to say that public opinion changes, and it's changed in the case of Israel, and will continue to change. I take it from the perspective of someone who is increasingly maddened by life in the echo chamber. And I've been thinking about this in recent days. The same apparatus of interested parties and gullible media that has brought us this narrative onslaught for a decade is now shifting to accuse Israel of war crimes and genocide, and to create the impression that Republicans and conservatives are revolting against continued support for the state of Israel. And this is what I call the echo chamber. It was given that name in David Samuel's amazing piece about Ben Rhodes, Obama's deputy national security advisor, nicknamed Hamas in the Obama administration, who was the public opinion guru behind support for the Iran deal in 2015. And Rhodes told David in the course of this New York Times Magazine profile that his work was essentially to feed 25-year-old reporters who know nothing a line that the only alternative to the Iran nuclear deal was a regime change war that would embroil America for years and kill thousands of Americans. And guess what? He was able to do that because, as he put it, these reporters know absolutely nothing. But that same machinery was then used, as we've been learning in recent weeks, to portray Donald Trump as a Russian agent in 2016 and into the first years of his administration. It was then used to suppress any dissent over the idea that the COVID virus came from eating a bat in some wet market, whereas evidence, even at the time, was pointing to the fact that the COVID-19 pandemic originated in the Wuhan virology lab. Then the echo chamber was used to say that Joe Biden was in perfect health. How dare you question his cognitive decline? And as soon as we had the debate in June of 2024, the narrative switched to, oh my God, Joe Biden's going to bring us all down. We need to kick him off. Why is he refusing our entreaties to drop out? He's going to go down as the worst president ever. And then when he did drop out on 20 July, around that time, 2024, the narrative switched back to, yes, Joe Biden, you're a hero who will save democracy, and we have hot brat Kamala Summer. Woohoo, let's go, let's go. Now we have the Gaza is starving, Gaza has a famine, Israel's committing genocide. This is now the time to announce a Palestinian state, even though Hamas is continuing to harbor these hostages and is continuing to reject any of the ceasefire proposals Israel has. And moreover, this new narrative that I'm getting from the mainstream media that somehow the right is buckling in its support for Israel is being propagated despite all the evidence to the contrary. It began with this playbook article earlier this week saying that MAGA was in revolt over Israel, over Trump's support for Israel. The MAGA piece in Playbook was based on 3 quotations. A quotation from Steve Bannon, who has turned anti-Israel on his podcast since earlier this summer. Marjorie Taylor Greene, who's certifiable and whose comments on Jews go back years, and we know where she stands. And our former colleague Sohrab Ahmari, who has also turned into a vociferous critic of Israel in recent months. That was it. That was the only evidence. And then we have a follow-up now from the other pillar of the Washington establishment, Axios AM, which says this morning the same thing, that Republicans are in revolt. It features a quote from one of Bannon's proteges, Jack Posobiec, who points out that there's a split in generational support on the right for Israel. And you know what? That's fair. That shows up in the data, and you can see that online. And then what are its other 2 pieces of evidence? Marjorie Taylor Greene. And this is my favorite part. You know, that paragon of the Republican Party, the man who speaks for every Republican in Washington, D.C., Representative Tom Massey of Kentucky. He is really just at the vanguard of what Republicans and conservatives think, the Tom Massey. Donald Trump's most hated Republican, right? And so this happens. This is what I read in my inbox. And then I turn to Truth Social to see what the president is up to. And what does he post? President Trump. The fastest way to end the humanitarian crisis in Gaza is for Hamas to surrender and release the hostages, exclamation point, exclamation point, exclamation point, all caps. That is where the opinion lies. That is where the decisions are being made. And we have to resist falling into the echo chamber, which continues to exist despite a decade of being proven wrong again, and again.
Can I just say thank you for your attention to this matter, Matt? because that's the one thing that's missing from the True Social truth tweet, whatever we call it. Truth, his truth, Trump's truth. What's more, Stephen Witkoff, his emissary, is in Israel today, and the first actions that we're told are being taken are sanctions, not against Hamas, but against the PLO and the Palestinian Authority. So the Palestinian Authority is the governing body of the West Bank, and the PLO or Fatah is the dominating party in the government of the West Bank, which is currently in its 19th year of a 4-year term. Just so we understand how the democracy works in this region. So the administration appears to be hardening its pro-Israel position, which of course is not surprising in the dynamic not only of the echo chamber, but of the Washington power chamber. And I want to talk about the Senate vote last night on aid to Israel. But before we get to that, Christine, you are, a decade into a career trying to make sense out of, not that you haven't had more experience over a longer period of time writing about everything, but trying to make sense out of the distortive effects of internet culture, and I guess internet political culture, on our common civilization, our common culture, and all of that. And what I think we see since October 7th is what people came to call, the moving or the opening or whatever, the Overton window, in which views that were expressed after October 7th on a very extreme splinter element of the left, and then were given purchase and body by leftist activists on college campuses, have now spread to the Senate, which, again, I think there's a larger political story there. But how much do you think this tale that Matt talks about in relation to the echo chamber is a species not of the traditional 1982 polling that shows, but that's why I started with that. That yes, opinions can alter over, and can be the same as 43 years ago, but are really a species of the ways in which news or fake news or false news or complete distortions and falsehoods can grab and burrow themselves into people's consciousnesses.
Well, Matt's absolutely right to point to the thread that this has been going on for decades. What social media platforms in particular have done is serve as a massive accelerant. And that's, I think, why you can wake up this morning and see Axios quoting positively someone like Marjorie Taylor Greene, who only a few years ago they were, or even more recently, denouncing as a conspiracy theorist who has posited all kinds of theories about the Jews that would never have been acceptable on the floor of the House of Representatives, or at least not said out loud on the floor of the House of Representatives. So the acceptance of more extreme conspiracy theories and anti-Semitism has been growing for a while. The accelerant of social media has aided it. But I think when we look at, particularly post-October 7th, platforms like TikTok, what the big shift that I've seen that has really impacted our elected officials, unfortunately, is the power of images. Because so much of this information is no longer a link to a story that describes someone saying something with all the context, however misguided or biased it might be. And we saw this play out, by the way, with the New York Times' recent correction on, not on its major Twitter handle that all of its readers check, but when it had to acknowledge that it used a false image of a child that was suffering from a condition to argue that this was starvation. Most young people especially, but more and more of our elected officials are getting reactions from their constituents who've only seen a jarring, shocking image or a little snippet of video. And that is hard to counter with fact. That's hard to counter with evidence. That's very difficult to contextualize for people whose entire news diet is now mainly that form of consumption. So it's completely explicable if you've been seeing what social media in particular and sites like TikTok have been doing to our sense of cohesion and political culture. But the accelerant aspect of it is what's really in conflict with how our democratic norms and democratic processes have worked before this. It is why we are getting more extreme figures elected to Congress because they can converse with constituents in that language. I think it's bad for our institutions, but it is something that Donald Trump in particular early on understood and used to his advantage in building his own coalition. I think if our politics is shifting in that direction, we need some of our more thoughtful leaders, particularly in places like the Senate, to do what I think senators like Tom Cotton and others have done, which is understand the power of these tools and use them wisely rather than just as accelerants to more polarization.
I just want to follow up. You mentioned the Senate. So last night there was a vote on a series of anti-Israel resolutions that Bernie Sanders proposed. And I have the list of the senators who have voted for at least one of the anti-Israel resolutions. And I'm looking down the list. And you know what I don't see behind any of their names? An R. It's all Ds and the two independents, right, who caucus with the Ds. And yet, what do I get every morning? Splits in MAGA. Cleavages in the Republican Party. Clearly an attempt to divert attention from the fact that the Democratic Party is the one that has jettisoned all support for Israel. The Democratic Party is the one that is nominating Zoran Mamdani to be the mayor of New York City, just as what happens after Hamas says no ceasefire, we're keeping the hostages, we don't care if you continue to kill us all, that's good for us in the long run. Oh, we get a media campaign accusing Israel of war crimes.
But there is, just because I don't want to brush over entirely, there is a group or a groupuscule within MAGA that is undeniably and vociferously anti-Israel. Not talking about the Senate, I'm talking about influencers, led, of course, by Tucker and all the manosphere people that we've spoken about. That is real. That is real. And are they, the question to me is this, are they trying to influence Trump policy, or are they trying to supplant Trump and become MAGA in the future?
I think there is a genuine phenomenon going on here that relates to the fact that Trump is a lame duck. I mean, he's not acting like a lame duck. He is using the powers of the presidency, at least in these first 7 months, with remarkable agility and skill, getting his way. And this is not like any second term that we've ever seen. Usually the second term begins, and with maybe the exception of Bill Clinton pushing through welfare reform in 1990, or, sort of the balanced budget deal stuff in 1997. No second term has ever gone this way. Again, not really a second term. Like, there's no precise parallel in the modern era. But he's not going to be president in 2029, and the fight over the party's future, at least among resourceful, intelligent, determined, and I think quite morally unspeakable people, but nonetheless skilled and smart and able and understanding that the future is up for grabs, are planting flags all over the place and trying to do so inside the administration by creating two separate streams of policy views that are being expressed by the president and the White House, and will be the policies of the administration without question. And then the policy views of this emanating out of J.D. Vance's office through the kind of the world of the restrainers and the American people who wrote for the American Conservative and for the American Mind, and who have populated, conferences in the last 4 years, thrown by Charlie Kirk and all of that, all of whom are attempting to install little bits and pieces of policy around the administration that will provide some kind of a basis or a platform for some kind of a run for the dominance of the party as Trump, and obviously with grave difficulty, exits the stage. So that's part of it.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's a little more complicated. Look at Vice President Vance. He is the front runner for the 2028 Republican nomination. Whether he likes it or not, he is Donald Trump's guy. he's going to have to defend Donald Trump's policies. And you know what? At this point right now, defending Donald Trump's policies inside the Republican Party is a pretty good political bet, because Donald Trump continues to be the most popular, the most dynamic, and the most important Republican since Ronald Reagan. So in a way, there may be people who have these views who are around J.D. Vance, who might work for J.D. Vance, who might be under 40 and work in low-level positions for J.D. Vance. But I don't even think that's where J.D. Vance is. And all of his public comments, of course, have defended the administration, whether it's the 12-day war. He gave a speech in Ohio earlier this week on the One Big Beautiful Bill. He said, yes, the pictures are terrible, but Hamas needs to release the hostages. So there's what might happen is there's a space created for someone to challenge Vance from this perspective, from this more restrainer, more anti-Israel perspective. But I don't know how viable that is.
I don't know.
In Donald Trump's Republican Party, and just on Charlie Kirk too.
Yeah.
Yes, there are plenty of young kids who go to these TPUSA conferences who are anti-Israel and maybe even anti-Semitic. But Kirk has not moved that way. Kirk has opened the debate, so to speak.
He was putting his toe in the water last week, 3 or 4 different ways about how maybe Israel's gone too far and stuff like that. And then I think he pulled back. But that's Charlie Kirk, meaning there is a pool of water to dip your toe in, and it is being cultivated, or is being, it's being kind of like cleaned and fed, kept from drying up by MAGA, by this, because the argument that I would make is Vance, just like George H.W. Bush in 1988 or whatever, can't just run as Trump. He's going to have to say, I'm Trump plus. Trump plus what? Trump plus what Bush did was, I'm Trump plus, I don't want, 1,000 points of light.
Yeah, kinder, gentler nation.
And kinder, gentler. And, I'm gonna plant 1 billion trees. That's Bush moving that was H.W. Bush moving to the center to say, this was all too harsh. Reagan's wonderful, but he was just a bit too harsh. And so maybe if you don't like parts of that, you can come to me. I don't know that that's the direction that the right is going to want to go in 20. It may be like Trump wasn't harsh enough. I know it's a little hard to imagine that you could try to get to Trump's right if you're J.D. Vance. But you could. I mean, there's a long way to go, and I don't want to speculate. I have no idea what the issue set will be.
My point is,
2028.
Right now, in the concrete world of politics, and not the echo chamber.
Yes,
it is the Democratic Party.
But the Overton
that is organizing its politics against the state of Israel.
Yes, but the Overton window question remains on all sides, which is to say, if on October 8th, 2023, what Democrats did yesterday, 27 Democrats voting against aid to Israel on the grounds and saying so, that Israel is committing war crimes, that this are one of our closest Democratic allies openly accusing it of committing war crimes, creating a humanitarian disaster that it is all too clear has been created by the party that started and is continuing to force the continuation of the war by not doing what Trump said and giving up and sending the hostages back home, that they could get there, the 27 Democrats could get there, would have seemed fantastical on October 8th, 2023. And this is why, when you mention Mamdani, that's why what happened here in New York, you may say, it's New York, it's the media, all you ever do is talk about New York and America's bigger and all of that. Mamdani is a very, very big moment in this political moment, or in the history of this century. Why do I say that? Because Mamdani, in an off-year election, after the election of a president of the other party, has signaled that in a very large, in a place with 8.5 million people, so larger than many states, the most left-wing and the most anti-Israel candidate can win in a Democratic primary. And this is the special election. It's not a special election, but this is the parallel or the cognate to the special elections In 2009 and 2010, when the Tea Party emerged in the Republican Party to provide discipline inside the Republican Party for the message that what Barack Obama wants to do is outside the bounds of what we consider acceptable. It is socialist. It is anti-capitalist. He doesn't like America. We're going to walk around and read the Constitution and put it in our pocket and talk about the glories of the Constitution that he is trampling on. And if you were like a mainstream, mushy Republican who wanted to go along to get along and maybe make a deal, maybe say, you know what, maybe this healthcare thing, we should try it or something like that, you were going to get destroyed. And it formed an internal disciplinary structure inside the Republican Party that was like a boulder rolling down the hill from 2009 onward till we got to Trump, and the boulder literally rolling over the Republican National Committee headquarters and every other structure in the Republican Party.
But to Matt's earlier point, I do think it's useful to point out just how escalatory the rhetoric against Israel has become among Democratic Party leaders. I mean,
Right.
You now have elected Democratic senators boasting, saying, I'm not going to vote with Israel, even though I'm Jewish. I'm Jewish and I'm still against Israel. I mean, that's the level that's the norm now, which I find extreme in the sense of how quickly that's become the way they feel pressured to respond. And so Mamdani, in that sense, is this extremely gilded cage canary that's being lowered into our political culture right now.
I don't think he's being lowered. I think that you would not have this vote in the way that you had this vote without the Mamdani primary victory. That was a
You think that's a message to the Senate Democrats?
Yeah. First of all, the Senate minority leader, who was up, Chuck Schumer, who did not vote for this, but who is up for re-election next year. I think he's going to retire. I think he's going to be Mitch McConnell. I don't think he's going to run in the Democratic primary in New York because he will lose. Matt's making a face. I think he's going to lose.
Well, I'm not saying he wouldn't lose, but I just to take a step back here. Okay, Schumer just landed a whale in recruiting Roy Cooper, the former governor of North Carolina, to go into the Senate race. My understanding is he's trying to recruit Sherrod Brown to go back into the Ohio race to challenge John Husted, and he's trying to get Janet Mills, the governor of Maine, to go and challenge Susan Collins. So Schumer, as a political inside man, still has cards up his sleeves.
And that will not affect a single vote in the New York State Democratic primary next year.
But it might affect his decision to run for re-election. And that's where I disagree with you.
I don't think
he's going to retire.
Let me just put it this way. I'm saying that he could preemptively retire because he doesn't want to lose. Or if he sees...
Why would he preemptively retire if he thinks that they have a path to a Senate majority next year?
Because he's going to lose the primary.
Okay, well, I don't think he thinks he's going to lose the primary,
We don't know what
John.
he thinks.
Yeah.
We don't know what he thinks, and we don't know. And a lot of this...
You acknowledge that Zoran Mamdani's political profile does have something to do with the unique characteristics of New York City, including the demographic composition of New York City.
Where 70% of the vote that he would need to win statewide in a primary resides. 75%, something like that. The Democratic Party in New York State is focused in New York City. So if Mamdani, we don't know what's going to happen with Mamdani, and I this is preliminary, but I'm just using him as an example, which is to say that there is a move. A lot of the reason that these senators voted against all aid to Israel and made statements that they would never in a million years have made before, like Raphael Warnock and others, saying outrageous and slanderous things about the Jewish state, are because they're looking to fundraising, and they're looking to races next year, and they're looking to shore their support up on their left because they don't have a right to shore. They don't have a moderate base that is going to defend them.
The party has no leadership right now. It's very old, and I do think that much of Mamdani's appeal is his youth and seeming energy as much as it is his extreme positions, because he's already pulling back from a few of those, saying, I've learned, like, about whether we should defund the police in the wake of this horrible killing in Manhattan. He's like, well, I've learned, I've grown.
By the way, he
Maybe I
didn't
wouldn't
say
say
I.
that.
Yeah, and he
Well,
didn't.
He didn't
He
say
didn't
I.
actually back down from
And
his
he didn't
positions.
say I.
No,
And this
he
is
used
why. No,
the
let me.
word.
I got to tell you guys, because I heard it last night and you didn't, because I watched local news in New York City. He's starting to refer to himself in the third person. He's 33 years old. Mamdani is a person whose views are, are tempered by experience. He called himself Mamdani.
He's doing the Bob Dole.
Yeah, but except he called himself Mamdani. Like Bob Dole's like, Bob Dole's not going to do da 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 da. He said Mamdani, like, Mr. De-swell your head, buddy. You only got 500,000 votes.
Well, he's just spent the past week in his compound in Uganda, so
Yes.
I think that would do wonders for any ego. Maybe that
I
explains
agree.
why.
I agree, but I thought that was an interesting touch. Just you could.
I just
want to
say I get your point. I would look at it this way. What is the currency in the Democratic Party right now? Sheer, unadulterated, unmediated anger. That's what you have to express. That was why Cory Booker beclowned himself yet again on the Senate floor the other day. And, by the way, set up a political problem for his party by holding up police funding in a bill. But how can you express your anger? Well, you can go after one of the planks of Donald Trump's foreign policy, which is support for the state of Israel. And so, yes, this vote is responding to currents in the Democratic Party and the rise of the socialist left. But even that rise of the socialist left is part of this more general outrage and desire to fight, even though you're not really fighting, you're just really angry and expressing far left opinions that no one in their right mind will agree with at the end of the day.
Can I give you just a quick thing to support you, Matt, in your
You can always give me something to support me.
In the conversation that you and Abe were having about the Republican Party. And again, I think that we are on a teeter-totter a little bit, or things are unstable and situational. And if Israel can bring this war to a conclusion that seems to be unambiguously that it was a success for Israel, and that the hostages, or a lot of the hostages, got back, however you want to slice it, a lot of the instability on the right, I think, will stop. But Jewish Insider this morning summarizes this new Gallup poll that I alluded to, with only about a third of Americans now supporting Israel's military action, with 60% disapproving, whereas half of Americans supported it at the beginning of the war, which is, by the way, a smaller number than I had thought. Gallup's polling has been like 10 points worse for Israel than anybody else's polling over the last 20 months or something. And it's pretty consistent. So either I don't know what that's about. There's been a lot more. However, here's the point. The drop-off has come entirely from Democrats. 36% support in November 23, while 8% do now. Independents, 47% in 23, while 25 support now. 8% of Democrats in this poll say they support Israel's military action in Gaza. Among Republicans, however, support for Israel's military efforts has remained significant. The exact same share of Republicans who backed Israel's war against Hamas in November 2023, 71%, continue to support Israel's efforts today. Trump's decision to strike Israel's nuclear facilities has, if anything, bolstered GOP support for Israel. So we have this conversation going on among the supporters of Israel and Israelis and Israeli thinkers here, which is, it's now happened. Support for Israel is now a partisan matter. Republicans support Israel and Democrats oppose. And this is how terrible. This is terrible. Decades of bipartisan support in the United States are over. And if you go dig in, people will start blaming Israel for this. Like Netanyahu should never have given that speech in 2015 to the Congress against the Iran deal. That really turned the tide. But it was the first time that Democratic lawmakers felt it easy to attack and criticize him, which is nonsense. But nonetheless, a kind of mythos that arose in 2015. And I just think this is a naturally occurring development about which Israel, Jews, Zionists in America can do nothing. And it is very difficult for Jews and Zionist Jews in the United States who continue to want to support, to give their financial support to, and to be part of the larger Democratic Party coalition. The cognitive dissonance here is going to get screechingly loud in their ears, like the worst 12-tone music you have ever heard. And how, if Israel is important to them, what's going to happen over the course of, let's just say the next 2.5 years, as donors are approached for support from nascent presidential candidacies, from this aggressive effort to do something to forestall the Republicans growing their advantage in the Senate, which is what people kind of expect. Is despite your talk, Matt, of the terrific recruiting being done, getting the most popular politician in North Carolina to run for Senate next year, and the best candidate to run against Susan Collins in Maine, though Maine is littered with the corpses of people who think
Sherrod Brown lost, right? But so it's not necessarily he's the best bet either, but they're probably the best recruits they can hope for.
But nonetheless, so they're doing this aggressive recruit, whatever. But who is good? I mean, I hate to put it this way because now makes me sound like I'm in the protocols of the Elders of Zion. But you have no idea, or people have no idea, just how disproportionate the fundraising support, not only on the Democratic but also on the Republican side in American politics, is from American Jews. They make up 2% of the population, and maybe a factor of 10 or more when it comes to dollars that are given to support political causes and political campaigns. And this vote yesterday is a potential stake through the heart of a lot of high-level Democratic Jewish support for candidates, even though I assume that most Jews that I'm talking about here dislike Trump, or they're now in a totally schizophrenic mood toward Trump.
Or they
don't like the stuff of the universities, and they don't like the judges, and they hate ICE, and they don't like any of this, but they like Israel, and then now they're going to be all schizophrenic about this. But how you're going to go in and spend tens of millions of dollars on Zohran Mamdani's party in 2026, 27, and 28, that's a very open question.
One other thread here that we should pull just for a second is that there's still a lot of denial on the part of the Democratic Party about the non-white voters it lost to Trump in the last election and why those voters went to the right. And they're not, I don't think of them as MAGA at all. I think they're very opportunistic, but they really, really voted against a lot of the cultural and social issues that Democrats have made the core of their coalition. And our colleague Rui Teixeira, Liberal Patriot, and other writers there have been just methodically going through the list of some of those issues, obviously transgender and others, and race, and asking, so where have the Democrats learned a lesson? Where have they pulled back from these extreme positions? Every single one, they're doubling down. And that's going to also affect them, I think, both in the midterm.
Can we talk, therefore, about Sydney Sweeney? Please. It's time to talk.
I've been wanting to talk about Sydney Sweeney. I could talk about Sydney Sweeney any day of the week. I get to go first.
I'm pulling the
any day, any time.
Privilege.
So I'm happy that Christine had the segue there.
Yes.
Okay. So here's the thing about the Sydney Sweeney story, which I'm sure all our listeners will appreciate. I actually find it to be a wonderful reminder of something deeply great and American, which is that we love equality. And so there are a few things in life that are unequally distributed, and physical beauty is one of them. And it's very frustrating to people when physical beauty, which is unequally distributed and not really earned, is rewarded. And I think we're seeing that with the response to Sydney Sweeney, who is, by the way, she's got youth, she's got blondness, she's got pulchritude. It's like she's literally amazing and gorgeous to look at. And that's great. And she should earn lots of money selling blue jeans or whatever else she wants. But the hatred, the vitriol, the wild overreaction, and the idea that this is somehow about some coded Nazi eugenic theory is, I think, it speaks to two things. One, the obvious embrace of a backlash against this idea that beauty comes in every size and looks like anything. No, beauty is rare and a privilege, and some people have it and some people never will, and that's just a reality of human existence. She's got it in spades, and she knows it, and she's embracing it, and she's making money off of it, and good for her. There's a lot of people in this country who do not like that message, even though I think it's hilarious how much they've overreacted to her obvious appeal.
So we should say what the overreaction was about.
Yes, they said it's coded because they did a play on the word
literally.
blue jeans, JEANS.
In the
literally have to
ad for American
American
Eagle
American
jeans.
Eagle. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which actually harks back to a Brooke Shields ad back in the 80s where she's like, nothing comes between me and my Calvins. I mean,
that was a disgusting ad.
Yes, it was
Brooke
gross.
Shields was 14 years old. Sydney Sweeney, I believe, is 28 years old.
Yes.
And
she's
has
an
done
adult
an
woman
ad which is
with
all
an agent.
about how, don't I look fantastic in these jeans?
She doesn't even have to say it. She just looks at the camera. It's great.
Yeah, I look great in my jeans, right? And
I've got good genes.
yeah. So I got two things to say about Sydney Sweeney. Number one, she first made a real impression on me in the first season of The White Lotus as this daughter of privilege who had brought her African-American friend along with her on holiday. And they're sitting there reading, I think they're reading Judith Butler. I mean, they're reading some feminist text lying by the pool in Hawaii, and they keep attacking her brother and her, for their terrible privilege and their sexism and all of that. And meanwhile, sauntering around in their bikinis and, being as provocative as possible, a brilliant piece of satire of rich, privileged leftism as has yet been done. So she almost sort of emerged as this Janus face of modern contemporary femalehood, in which she plays a character who's preaching Judith Butler while, wearing the skimpiest bikini that you've ever seen in your entire life. And it's a very good performance, and it makes up for the fact that she didn't seem very good in the other stuff that sort of made her a big star. It made her seem like she was more than just a pretty face and a great body. So that's number one. Number two, if I can get incredibly pretentious for a minute, the first great satire of totalitarianism, the first satire of anything maybe, but really the first great satire is a play by Aristophanes called The Assembly of Women, which is about how Athens is taken over by its women. And it turns out that they are monstrous collectively.
And very envious of beautiful women.
And they pass monstrous laws, among them that anybody can have sex with anybody else as long as the first people you have sex with are older and uglier. That's in order to balance out the genetic injustice.
I will point out this play was written by a man. I just for the record.
I understand, but that's why it's so funny in my view. Like it is sort of a male paranoid fantasy. But first of all, it's one of the funniest things ever written. And in the end, at the end of this play, because of all this response, there's been all this response about how this ad makes me feel bad as a person of color. This ad is making me is reestablishing whiteness as a standard of beauty. This ad is, what about is fat shaming? This ad is this ad is that. How about how I feel, say thousands of people on TikTok, thus providing American Eagle jeans with hundreds of millions of dollars of free publicity and turning it into now,
Which was the
it's
point
like
of
the
the ad.
reverse of Dylan Mulvaney. Like Dylan Mulvaney comes, advertises Bud Light and destroys Bud Light. American Eagle, which is facing the prospect of Amazon going in directly into the jeans market, which is a thing that isn't much talked about. Amazon is about, I hear, is about to like go and present its own line of jeans. And so this is a way of getting ahead of that, potentially. Has just done itself an enormous favor. I'm sure it's going to increase market share.
You know, for me,
yeah.
So just as a note on how powerful this social justice stuff is, I watched the ad. I saw, then it ends with Sydney Sweeney has good genes, Jeans, right? And then I read the complaints, and they almost got me. You know, like this speaks to Christine's point about like this thread in American culture, where, you know, reading the complaints, they almost got me. I was almost like, well, they are playing with, obviously, the genes and genes. It's not great. I don't care. Ultimately, they didn't get me, but like they almost got me because because we are, at the end of the day, we are obsessed with equality.
Yeah, I'm not. I don't care. I love Sydney Sweeney. I want more Sydney Sweeney in my life. That has been basically my rule for the past couple years.
And
so I'm happy to see her.
Else.
Yes, I'm happy to see her once again exhibit her savvy and guile, which if you have been following her career closely, as I have, she's very sharp in how she leverages her beauty in order to create publicity, in order to make films which would not be successful. And here she is again in this little snippet of an ad doing the same thing. Why? Because she's great. And we all, what's not to like about her?
She also, can I add, she had a response, some movie critic dissed her performance in that sort of, you know, frothy rom-com she did a few years ago.
Glenn Powell,
and said, you know, oh, well, she's a pretty face, but she can't act. And she had a wonderful kind of like, okay, whatever. She just it rolls right off her back. And she does understand, I think one of the reasons Matt's absolutely right about her career trajectory is she knows she has a shelf life. So why shouldn't she do absolutely everything she can right now? I think she makes like Baskin Robbins ads.
I also want to contrast her with another young woman who I follow very closely, the supermodel Emily Ratajkowski, right? Who is a socialist, anti-Zionist, political idiot, but very beautiful. And yet, somehow, when Emily Ratajkowski shows up wearing next to nothing, I don't hear the chorus of woke social justice warriors go up in arms, right? But Sydney Sweeney, who happens to have roots in Middle America and has commented years ago how she kind of gets the MAGA phenomenon, she is always the object of vitriol. I'm the believer in equality, John. I believe in treating both Sydney Sweeney and Emily Ratajkowski as beautiful objects to behold. Why don't I get any credit?
Your nobility is beyond reproach.
Thank you.
But Abe is onto something, and so are you, and so is Christine, which is that ad is about more than that ad. It is not an accident that it is provocative ideologically. That's why I could contrast it to Dylan Mulvaney. They're like, we're making an ad. It looks exactly like the Calvin Klein ads of the 1980s. It doesn't exactly look like the Brooke Shields ad. It looks like an even weirder Calvin Klein ad made in the 1980s that was set in a basement rec room that was likened to porn. That it looked like a porn movie of the 1980s, only it was a Calvin Klein ad for jeans. That is the setting of that ad. Whoever directed it, whoever conceived it, this was very knowing and it was purposeful. And the idea is sexy is back. That is what that, and you know what? That means a sexy girl in sexy jeans with her shirt halfway buttoned down, showing her cleavage. That is what America in 2025 can be again after 10 years or 8 years since Me Too, of this notion that only the male gaze is interested in portrayals of conventional, old line sexuality in which men are attracted and women are given some perhaps impossible goal to aspire to physically. And that's culture. That's why I mentioned Aristophanes. 2,500 years ago, Aristophanes was making fun of this idea that beauty is unjust, and that if left to their own devices, jealous people will outlaw beauty or criminalize beauty because it makes them feel bad. And you know who it doesn't make feel bad? Most of the rest of us, really, who don't have that particular problem just looking at somebody beautiful, because that's what aesthetics is about, is admiring beauty.
I would say people should read Roger Scruton's excellent short little volume about beauty. It has it touches on a lot of these issues and is really fantastic. But there's another thing that happened, I think, in the last decade, and it's not that we were told that we were told that men could be women and that they were even better at being women than women themselves. So as a woman, I can look at Sydney Sweeney and go, it's awesome that that's what's being celebrated, because she's actually female. And as far as I know, those are her own parts. She hasn't even been seriously, plasticized like some of our starlets have. So that's great. But also this idea that having any sort of sense of human understanding of beauty is wrong, because actually we are wired to see certain faces as prettier than others or more handsome than others, certain body shapes. This is actually our wiring as a species. So you can allow for a vast range of what is considered attractive, and that's true of everyone. One of the comments I saw about the Sydney Sweeney was from a male friend of mine who loves a good-looking woman, but was like, she's not my type, and he likes something a little different. That's great. But the idea that you can't hold up what is objectively a beautiful young woman and say, isn't she hot? And she's selling jeans. That is controversial is a sign of just how far afield we've gone theoretically about what it means to be a woman and what it means to be beautiful in our culture in the last decade.
But
okay, so we have
I just think we're focusing on the good genes part quite enough, because that's also very deliberate. And here's
yes.
The way the culture war works and the explosion of rage over this ad on the left, here's what I fully expect to happen. Now, I'm looking to see when white supremacists start embracing Sydney Sweeney as like Pepe the Frog.
But they don't have to.
And all the fun will be sucked out of everything.
It's just an expression. It's just, where do you think that people's physical characteristics come from? The sky?
Yeah, but
they come from your genes.
Besides
it's meaningless.
Let me just talk about Sydney
Sweeney.
Sweeney.
It's not meaningless. I'm not offended, but it's purposefully.
She's not.
They're winking at something. They're winking at something.
Yes.
Abe is right about that.
They're winking at something, but what they're winking at also is the humorlessness of the idea that putting an ad up with a obese woman in a bikini is something you're supposed to say, that's what I like. That's sexy. Or here's this drag queen pretending to be a woman. Now I really should drink Bud Light to show that I'm, sufficiently ideologically.
It's a gesture to what Christine is saying. Human nature. This is This is nature. Nature is what cannot be helped. You cannot help this.
Yeah.
And the left, in its utopian desires, is always trying to revolt against it.
And
that's what we're seeing play out.
Knew.
And that's exactly that's why human nature hasn't changed since his time.
And so that's why we have two recommendations today: Beauty by Roger Scruton, a really wonderful short essay on this question of how, as I think Scruton said, beauty speaks to us directly like the voice of an intimate friend. We cannot look away. We cannot but listen to it. It is what we want out of life is a little beauty. That's like in the midst of all of our ugliness, what helps us through the day are little moments where we can enjoy beauty. That's in 10,000 different ways. And there's that. And then there's The Assembly of Women by Aristophanes, the greatest political play or the greatest political satire of politics, not necessarily of, the political, like Gulliver's Travels is a greater political satire.
Or of the female nature, necessarily.
Yeah, or of the female nature. But it is a genuinely great, it's about totalitarianism and before totalitarianism had a name. And so you can read that too. There we go. Very highbrow while we talk about an ad for jeans. So that's the kind of transcendence you can get here on the Commentary Magazine podcast. We'll be back tomorrow. For Christine, Matt, and Abe, I'm John Podhoretz. Keep the candle burning.